St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Our offense hasn't clicked the way we want it to. We're aware of it. It's a matter of time before those guys get going.
league average offensively. And I am getting to the point now where I am officially concerned. He does not yet have a hit against a slider. The velocity was starting to creep up on him last year where it was a problem high in the zone. It has once again been an issue for him so far this year. I'm not telling you that Goldie's going to be a terrible hitter. I don't believe that. But I do think there's a real chance this season that Goldie is a roughly league average hitter. And if that happens, dude, I don't know how the Cardinals make that up unless Jordan Walker takes the step that we were hoping for him this year.
And that doesn't seem like it's happening.
You need Jordan Walker to be that right-handed presence that Paul Goldschmidt was expected to be. Otherwise, you look at this lineup, you're missing that middle of the order bat that you thought you had coming into the season.
Yeah, when I look at this lineup right now, and I'll ask you this too, BK, how many guys do you trust when they step to the plate?
In the Cardinals lineup right now?
Because I personally believe there's two of them that I trust. I'm sorry, three of them that I trust.
I trust Donovan.
Yeah.
Right now, not all season, but right now, I trust Nolan Arenado. I think he's pulled out of it. I trust Wilson Contreras.
That's my
trust
second.
Mason Wynn.
That's my third.
I trust Ivan Herrera. I trust Lars Nootbaar. So that's the thing that's kind of funny. I just named 6 players.
Yeah.
This lineup should not be performing the way that it is with those 6 guys, but far too often, it's Goldie coming up with a big spot. It's Walker coming up in a big spot. You're getting nothing, and I mean nothing, out of your center field position right now. So when you have all of those things that are working against you, I mean, a third of your lineup is basically a zero.
Well, and like you had said with the pop of Paul Goldschmidt, and I would argue, I mean, look, Gorman's hit home runs, but it does seem like he's just swinging for the fences every time he steps up there. I think you need to have pop and power elsewhere that's not just the home run ball. Wilson Contreras has been doing that. He's been showing the ability to have power, move guys over. I just look at it, and like I mentioned earlier, with those clutch hitters, that pop, that power that we're talking about, I don't think you have it from Goldschmidt. Right now, it doesn't seem like you have it from Nootbaar, although I think he will get there. Nolan Arenado may have broken out of it now, but I'm still a little skeptical that that's going to continue. Gorman does not have it other than in spurts, which we've talked about that's going to happen, and Walker doesn't have it. So the other guys that we're talking about being confident in, Wilson Contreras is probably your power hitter right now. Brendan Donovan and Mason Wynn are just contact guys that can get on base for you, and Herrera is in and out of the lineup. So right now we're talking about 2 guys that are supposed to carry an entire offense to where they built their offseason around our offense is going to carry our roster. And I understand Ollie saying, like, look, patience is there, and it's going to break out. We know it's going to break out. You got to be confident with it. But at what point do you say, if this doesn't break out for us, we are going to be way behind an 8 ball that puts us somewhere where we can't dig ourselves back out
So
of.
that's the thing, man. I looked this up yesterday. Like, you look around the National League, it's not just you that's dealing with these kinds of issues. Like, look over in the American League, for example, first. Dude, have you seen what the Astros are going through right now? Their offense has been every bit as bad as yours has so far this year. Their pitching has been terrible. The Astros might be this year in the American League what you were last year in the National League.
Yeah.
Where it falls apart. Nobody can really explain it. We're all waiting for them to get back on track, and it just never happens. They're 6-14 through their first 20 games so far this year. You look in the National League, man, outside of the Central Division, and I know that's a big caveat, but hey, this weekend, like, you could gain 3 games on the Brewers, and that's the nice thing about playing in this division is you can go up head-to-head against them. But outside of the National League, the teams that are above 500 this year, or outside of the Central, in the National League, the Phillies are 11-8. The Mets are 10-8. The San Diego Padres are 11-10, and then it's the Dodgers and Braves who we knew. Like, the teams that are also in that kind of peer program type of area with you in the National League, they also are right around 500. So despite the Cardinals' offense being what it's been so far this year, you're 9-10.
Yeah.
You're still right there with all of these other contenders for that wild card spot in the National League. Nobody has pulled away. It kind of feels like the Blues early in the season, where it's like, hey, you look around, nobody else is really pulling away either. So you're still in it, despite the fact that it does not feel good when you're watching the Cardinals right now. If they go out there, win 2 out of 3 this weekend, you'll end up being like 1 game behind, 1.5 games, I think, behind the Brewers. So nobody has pulled away. But, man, if this offense doesn't get back on track, it's really hard to believe in anything meaningful taking place this season for the Cardinals.
And the problem for your offense, if you don't figure it out sooner rather than later, you might be waiting too long. And if your pitching doesn't hold up the way it's been holding up, well, now you're going to have, welcome back to the totality. You're going to have pitching struggle, offense struggle, and that's where you that's where you re-enter where you were last year, which I think is a massive problem for this team, because once you get into that snowball, I'm not sure if this team's mentally strong enough to get themselves out of that snowball.
I don't have the same fear about a snowball. I have a fear about them just like middling all season long.
Yeah.
Because I do think that the defense is much better. I do think that the base running yesterday, notwithstanding, bad moment by Wilson Contreras. A couple of days ago, another bad moment for the Cardinals as well. Their base running wise, they've been better on the bases this year, more aggressive on the bases this year than they were last year. And the pitching, I think, is significantly improved. Even if it's not like an A+, I think it's a B- probably this year with the pitching. Last year was like a D-.
Yeah.
So I think you've improved so much in all the other areas that it will keep you alive. I wonder about this offense right now. And I do think this is a hard thing to do as a manager, and I saw a bunch of people criticizing Ollie for it yesterday. I think there's been plenty to be able to criticize about the manager and what he's done so far this year. I do not think this is a fair one. I don't think any manager in Major League Baseball would have made the switch with Paul Goldschmidt batting lower in the order yet. I think you give that guy 20 games. This is a future Hall of Famer. He's working through some stuff. You try to figure that out. I think this weekend is probably the last opportunity for him to work through things before you have to make some serious changes to your lineup. If it doesn't get fixed against Milwaukee, I do think by the time you get to that Arizona Diamondback series, you see them again, I think that's when you have to say, okay, we got to make some changes.
Yeah.
We got to go with something different in our lineup. Goldie, we love you. We believe it's going to get figured out, but you got to bat seventh for a little while.
Right now, Wilson Contreras should probably be hitting second for you.
Probably.
I would be.
Or Mason Wynn.
Or
I
Mason,
would be okay
yeah.
with Mason Wynn batting second as well, and then going with like Contreras batting fifth with Newt batting third.
Yeah.
Or Contreras third with Newt fifth.
Clutch hitters need to be in clutch positions right now, and I think you have to pluck Goldschmidt out of that position. Just like you did with Nolan Gorman. You took Nolan Gorman from the 3 spot because you're like, hey, he's not clicking right now for us. We got to move him down. At some point, you have to take away he's a veteran presence, and he knows how to do this. He'll figure it out. You got to put clutch hitters in the right position.
He's Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. We've got Jordan Deacon back in the studio for us. Grant Francis is doing some great work for us today as well out here as we are broadcasting at the Centene Community Ice Center. We're in the E&B Granite Studios. Grant will be getting some player audio throughout the day today. We are expecting to have some players walking through the E&B Granite Studio starting at 11:30. We'll have that until about 12:30, and that is when Doug Armstrong will be speaking live to the media out here at the Centene Community Ice Center. We will play that press conference in its entirety right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN, coming up later today. We will be joined in person by Doug Armstrong at 1 o'clock. Drew Bannister will join us at 1:30. So plenty of Blues conversation throughout the day here on BK and Ferrario. But coming up next, we want to give our thoughts. The season has officially come to an end, Alex. How would we assess what the Blues were able to accomplish with the 2024 season? We'll give you our thoughts on that. Hear from you as well at 314-399-9646. That's next here on BK and Ferrario.
right back to more of it. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Alongside Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. We're broadcasting live in the E&B Granite Studios out of the Centene Community Ice Center. We're expecting to be joined by a Blues player coming up here in just about 15 minutes, so keep it locked here on BK and Ferrario. Throughout the day today, we'll be joined by some players. We'll be joined by Doug Armstrong. We'll be joined by Drew Bannister as well to recap the 2024 season. But first, we do so, Alex, here on 101 ESPN. Season came and went. For me, I would consider it a success. I know it's hard to do that when you don't make the playoffs, but this team got to 92 points, man. And if you told me that about midway through the year, especially right after they fired Craig Berube, I would have said you're crazy. There's no way they're going to be able to do that. They found a way. They got great goaltending all season long. Defense was better than it was a year ago. Not great, but better. Kind of similar to the Cardinals pitching, right? The bar was so low to clear, but they did clear it by a meaningful margin. And then I would say the thing that probably matters the most from this season is what you found out, what you learned about your young forwards. I think Robert Thomas took a huge step forward this year. I think Jake Neighbors took a massive leap forward this year. And between those two guys, you now have franchise cornerstones. I think Jordan Kyrou by the end of the season looks like a much better player than what he was at the beginning of the year. Whatever you think about him for what he did earlier on, I get it. But he took a big leap in 31 goals, 67 points. It's a solid season out of Jordan Kyrou. So for me, I would consider this season to be a success, despite it also being underwhelming. How do you feel about the 2024 Blues?
Yeah, that's kind of where I came out with it. You know, last night doing post-game with the season officially being over, you know, you kind of looked at what took place and, you know, on one hand, it's hard to say it was a success because this team was a playoff team. And I know that's crazy to say, but, I mean, you're talking about 4 more wins. 4 wins, and you're in the playoffs. And those 4 wins were 2 against the San Jose Sharks, 1 against Columbus, and 1 against Chicago. And, I mean, I'm being generous there because, you know, you could have had 2 more wins against Columbus and 3 more wins against San Jose, but that's the part that is frustrating.
If you had literally just taken care of those 3 games against San Jose, you have the points to get into the
playoffs. Yeah. And then you've got that one of the 2 against Columbus, the 1-0 shutout loss that you had where you just did not show up offensively. That's the one that stings. So that's the part that does sting. But, you know, you were texting me last night, and the part that really puts it into perspective is the 92 points. I mean, from 2003 until 2011, you hit 92 points once, and you were the playoff team in 2008, 2009, but all of those other years, sure, you were at 90, you were at 91, but you weren't playoff teams. And that, to me, when you sent that, I looked at it, and I'm like, damn, that's what a rebuild looks like. When you're going 7 years of being 50 points, 80 points, 70 points. Now, the Blues did a great job of turning it around faster. I mean, they had 3 years where it was first overall pick, they had 4th overall pick, and then they were talking about being in a playoff position. But that's what a rebuild looks like. And now, when you think about it and to put it into perspective, and, you know, of course, I'm going to be the optimistic one with this one too, but in one season, you had 11 different points. You went from being 81 points to 92 points. That's 5 more wins. Yep. You got 5 more wins than what you were last year with the exact same roster. In fact, I could argue you probably had a worse roster than what you had last year because Verana wasn't that good. Verana wasn't there. Kapanen wasn't as good. Blais wasn't as good. Hayes was not the player you thought he was going to be.
Think about the players that you lost from the beginning of last year to where you are today.
Absolutely.
It's a significant downgrade for a lot of those spots. I would say the biggest thing, though, is like Jake Neighbors replaced the production that you thought you were going to be missing.
Yeah. And Robert Thomas replaced the production that you lost in Ryan O'Reilly. Absolutely. So the fact that you went from a roster that got worse to pick up 5 more wins, to me, that is an optimistic side of this season. So, look, it sucks that they missed the playoffs. I do and truly believe they would have been a playoff team if not for laying eggs in some of those games. But to me, that's building blocks like we always talk about in a retool, and you hope that the Blues now can accomplish what they did from 2006 to 2009 to where they went from 2 bad years to in the playoffs, and then 90, 87, and then they went to 109 points.
Yeah, that was the bottoming out type of a rebuild. And what they're doing right now is they're trying to get it back on track as quickly as humanly possible.
Yeah.
That was the mandate. That appears to be what they're doing. Going from 81 to 92 points is a meaningful improvement. I mean, this year was basically what they did in 2020. You look at the points percentage. The 2020 COVID-shortened season, they were at a 563 points percentage. This year, 561 points percentage. That year you made the playoffs. This year you didn't. It's just a matter of like what was the level that was necessary to get in, right? And this year you didn't quite meet it because the Western Conference around you had some better points percentages. I think if you make the right couple of moves, you could make the playoffs next year.
Absolutely.
That doesn't mean you're going to be a Stanley Cup competitor, but with a couple of good moves, I think you're right there. You're starting to see the pieces that are building. Last year was kind of hard to see that, man. Last year you looked at the roster and you saw as many pieces that were leaving as pieces that were going to be meaningful for a championship core 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And this year I feel better about that. So I know that it's hard to say that anything where you've got a Stanley Cup winning coach that gets fired and you've got a team that ends up missing out on the playoffs, when that happens, it's hard to call it a success. And if you as a fan don't view this as a successful season, I'm not telling you should feel otherwise. But for me, my view of it, and I take, generally speaking, like I remember doing the show with Danny Mack, and he took the manager's perspective, I took the GM's perspective. It's kind of the way that I view sports more often than not. From my 10,000-foot view of the Blues roster right now, I would say this was a success.
Yeah, and you know, for me, I'm with you. I say this is a successful season. I mean, again, it's hard to say that when you don't make the playoffs, but I think from where you were last year to this year, it was a success. Here's the part, too, that I think is important to understand. When you call it a success, it's not from the overall record. It's from individual pieces of 100%. The roster. And like when you go back and talk about that span that we were discussing from 2003 to 2011, you know, what you had in that frame, it took you 7 years to get there, but you figured out you had a top centerman, you figured out you had a top goal scorer, you figured out you had a top defenseman, and you were searching for the goaltender. You hoped it was Jake Allen. Now we have just wrapped up this season where I can confidently tell you, you pull up the athletic list, checkmark list of playoff caliber teams, you can check off elite centerman because I think next year Thomas is going to be a 100-point player. You can check off a number one defenseman. I won't call Parayko an elite defenseman, but I will call him a number one defenseman. And you can check off an elite goaltender and a qualified backup goaltender. And to me, that is the building blocks of a team. You can adjust the rest of that puzzle as long as you get the outer edge of the puzzle. And I think the Blues accomplished that this season.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to get involved in the show. We did have somebody on the text line that said, guys, the biggest difference this year was just as simple as they had a better version of Jordan Binnington. I think that was probably the biggest difference for the Blues this year.
I think the defense improving in front of Binnington also makes Binnington better.
I agree. I also just I think the biggest change with Benner for me was mentality.
Oh, absolutely.
And you could see it. You could feel it in his press conferences. You could hear it. He just sounded and felt like a different guy. Mm-hmm. He felt like somebody that is now enjoying the journey, and I know that sounds like super cliche, but it is so important, man, when you've got these long seasons that are a grind and you go through slumps. Like baseball is this way too. And I think previously he was about the results, and this is me playing armchair psychologist, I get that. But previously I think he focused a lot on the results of like, this is not going my way. What do I need to do to be able to will us back to victory? And so he almost tried to do too much. And this year it felt like he was about the process of, all right, didn't make that save, but I'm in my right position. Next time that happens, it's going to work for me.
Yeah.
And I think that was such a massive change for him that it makes me more confident moving forward that he can continue being this guy. And it's why I absolutely would not trade him this offseason. I heard the TNT crew discussing that yesterday during the intermission. I have no interest in trading a Jordan Binnington. That would not be something that even crosses my mind.
No, I'm with you. I would go down the path of trading a Joel Hofer before I would even discuss a Jordan Binnington. I mean, listening to his post-game answers yesterday, and look, I guarantee they're going to be saying the same thing. It's going to be the cliche saying, but like when Binnington says it, I go back to when Berube was fired, and somebody asked him, if you feel responsible, and he said, every one of us should feel responsible in this room. If you don't want to play for the jersey, then get the hell out of here. He said last night, they asked, Like, do you look at 92 points as a success? Binnington immediately goes, no, I don't. He's like, we need this group to find a way to fight more for each other and find more internally to be a playoff team. And I think a lot of Blues fans right now are feeling like the Blues wasted a great year of Jordan Binnington because, in my opinion, if you get into the playoffs, I think there are 3 teams that you have their number because of Jordan Binnington. I think it was Dallas, I think it was Edmonton, and I think it was Vancouver. So those types of moments make you regret what took place this season. But Jordan Binnington, goalies don't wear the captaincy. Jordan Binnington is right up there with Braden Shen in terms of the leader in that locker room going into next season.
He's Alex. I'm BK. You got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up next, we will either have questions for a Blues player, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line, or we'll have questions and answers from you guys. One of the two. We'll see what happens next here on BK and Ferrario.
101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. This SportsCenter update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. The Cardinals lost their final game of the series against the Athletics by a score of 6-3 yesterday. They're off today and begin a 6-game homestand tomorrow. The first pitch against the Brewers is at 7:15. And last night, the Blues wrapped up their season with a 2-1 shootout loss to the Dallas Stars. BK and Ferrario are at the Centene Community Ice Center, where they expect to have various Blues players drop in, and then Doug Armstrong and Drew Bannister will have their respective press conferences in just a bit. We've got plenty of end-of-season Blues talk for you today right here on 101 ESPN. I'm Jordan Deacon. The SportsCenter update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Together, Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
This is exactly where you want to be, listening to us. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN. Maybe. It's BK and Ferrario's questions and answers.
Presented by Window World St. Louis.com. Simply the best for less.
9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. We'll be joined by a Blues player in studio coming up here in just a little bit. But right now, it's time for you to win a chance, to win a 4-pack of tickets to next Tuesday night's Budweiser Bash for Cardinals versus the Diamondbacks. Next week is the first Bud Bash game of the season. It features a limited edition Jeff Suppan bobblehead. Right now, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. If you are texter number 18 and you can tell us who was the last Blues player to have at least 85 points in a season, texter number 18 is getting that 4-pack of tickets to the Cardinals game next Tuesday. Robert Thomas had 86 points this season, and if you want to take that music down for us back in the studio, Jordan, we are happy to be joined in studio right now by another Blue, Nathan Walker. We appreciate you hopping in with us. A successful season for Nathan Walker, of course, with the contract extension this year as well. You get through the 82 games. What was your biggest takeaway from the 2024 Blue season?
I think there was a few, but I think the main one was, I thought we did a really good job playing against the top teams in the league, and I think that just goes to show that, that we can play with the teams that are in the playoffs right now and the teams that have won the divisions and everything like that. Obviously, on the flip side, it's a bit disappointing with, how our record was against the teams that are in the playoffs. Obviously that's something that we need to clean up heading into next season.
So many fans ask questions, and you hear it all the time, Nathan, about those games where you struggle against those other struggling teams. From a player's perspective, what happens in those games?
If I had an answer for you, I think
it wouldn't happen, right?
I think we would have fixed it early on, but I don't know. It's I'm not sure. No one's really going to have an answer for that. It's just kind of sometimes the way it goes, unfortunately, whether it's a mental thing or, something else that plays a part into it. But, it's definitely something that needs to get cleaned up.
It seems like one of those things, too, Nathan, where because I recall in those San Jose Sharks games, the first period, the Blues would just blow out the Sharks in terms of shots on goal. It was just the goaltender would make the saves, and everybody goes through it, right, where you start clutching a little bit more and you're thinking, oh, man, we got to get this one through, and then one goes in the other way, and it's, oh, no, here we go.
Yeah. If you're getting your looks and it's not going in, you definitely start gripping the stick a bit more and thinking, what's going on here? What else can we do? And like you said, they can pop 2 quick ones and then you kind of get deflated like that. So
absolutely.
Like I said, it happens, and it needs to be something that's that can get cleaned up.
Nathan Walker, Blues forward, joining us now here on BK and Ferrario. Nathan, I am curious. Something we've been talking about on the outside looking in over the past few seasons is the Blues developing an identity on that fourth line. It feels like you guys were able to do that this season with the fourth line that you were able to develop. What was that like for you guys to figure each other out, and then by the end of the season, you guys really hit the ground running?
Yeah, obviously playing with Sonny and Torps was great. Very unfortunate what happened to Sonny at the end there. But Sonny's so smart with the puck. He's going to be in the right spot for you if you need help. And obviously Torpo pushes the pace, so it kind of brings you guys into the fight as well. And I think we just read well off each other, and we kind of knew which way we needed to play in order to be a successful fourth line.
Speaking of bringing guys into the fight, we had Kelly Chase up on the broadcast on Sunday afternoon, and he was talking about how he loves the way that you play, and he talked about the conversation you and him were having about, fighting with one hand and getting into it. It's an element that may not be in the NHL so much, Nathan, but from your perspective as a role player, how impactful is that feistiness, that tenacity from individuals once they step on the ice?
Yeah, I think it definitely plays a big part, especially if the team's a little flat. Maybe the energy's not there that night. You can kind of bring that and, bring some guys into the fight with you and kind of show them, this is our game here. Let's not let it slip away.
What have you learned about yourself as a player over the last couple of years as you've gotten more extended runway in the NHL?
I think just knowing my role a lot more and knowing, what I need to do in order to be successful and play a consistent game, night in, night out.
Does that feel different to you? Because once you were called up here, you didn't miss a game. You played the rest of the stretch, to where last season it was kind of in and out of the lineup. How different are those seasons for you to where when you're in and out versus being in there every single night?
Yeah, obviously you want to play every game. You want to play 60 minutes a game. I think it's the competitive nature of hockey plays. You want to be on the ice all the time. But I think going back to last year and then comparing it with this year, I think just the little details that I managed to kind of get down and just be a little bit better at.
Is there anything in particular, I know season just ended yesterday for you guys, but that you're going to be focusing on this offseason to bring more of in your game in the next upcoming year?
Yeah, probably just a little bit of everything, honestly. You have certain things you want to work on, but, there's obviously you want to get better at everything as well. So I think, whether it's making sure the pucks are out, pucks are in, making sure you're hitting the net a bit more and things like that. I think, you just kind of try and work on your overall game. You've
been in the organization now for some time, Nathan. You've been in the minors. You've been at the NHL level. You're starting to see a lot of those younger players get bigger opportunities with the Blues. What have you noticed in the development of those guys?
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, you obviously saw Bolduc, playing on the top line. He was doing a really good job.
But how would you rate his top line performance?
Yeah.
Zach Bolduc, by the the way, in studio. He'll be joining us coming up here in just a minute.
He's going to get a big
staring right at Nathan.
He's going to get a big head if I say it. So. But no, it's great. I mean, I had the chance to play with Dina and Boldy in Springy, and to see them, just in the span of one season, kind of just take off. It's great to see. It's obviously good for the organization to have players playing the minors for a bit, and then they come to the NHL and they kind of do that seamless transition. So it was really good.
The guys still not let you live down taking out Alexandrov's teeth?
I haven't heard too much about it, but
you got a cake for him, man. I feel like
you did bake him a cake.
I baked it, yeah.
Yeah, between the Tim Tams and the cake that's going around in that locker room, they got to think you're the best out of all of them.
Yeah. Where'd the cake come from? Bring us behind the scenes. Was that something that somebody brought here for you to have the social media moment, or did you actually go out to like Costco and bring Costco cake?
It was a great idea. I definitely didn't go and bake the cake. The media team came up and we kind of came up with that idea together. And thought it'd be a bit funny for the.
It was great.
And I heard Curbs mention that there was a fake tooth anyway, so it doesn't really matter, right? You get it cleaned up and you're back in.
Right. It was a bit dirty too. Now he's got a fresh white one.
So technically, you helped him out in that situation.
That's what I keep saying. Everyone,
non-hockey related. Do you have any plans this offseason for yourself, or you got any travel set up for you, or what's your offseason look like?
We'll probably head home in the next few weeks here. My daughter's still in school, so we're just kind of hanging out for a bit.
Sure.
We'll head home and then just kind of chill out for a bit, and then back into the swing of training and getting on the ice.
How old's the daughter?
She's 4.
4, okay. Yeah. I'm 2 and 3 right now, so I'm a ways away from that. But I've heard 3's I've heard 3's the toughest, so I'm just trying to make my way through that right now.
I think 4.
Oh God! Come on, Nathan.
I'm sorry. We got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, so it's pretty hectic.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
I'm going to be talking to you a lot more in the locker room then throughout next year, because I'm going to be in that territory next season.
We're just trying to get sleeping through the night at this point. That's all we're focused on.
Oh, once you get that first night of full sleep.
It's glorious.
I'll let you know how it feels whenever we get
I'm just trying to get potty training down, so once we get there, I'll be a little bit happier.
Nathan Walker, Blues forward, congratulations on the contract extension. We appreciate the time today. All the best this offseason. We'll talk with you again soon.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Nathan.
It's Nathan Walker, Blues forward, joining us here on BK and Ferrario. Coming up next, we're going to be joined by Zach Bolduc, Blues forward, here on 101 ESPN.
for St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Kiley, happy to be joined in studio at the E&B Granite Studios out at the Centene Community Ice Center. We've got Zach Bolduc, Blues forward, joining us right now. Zach, we appreciate the time, man. Congratulations for getting through first season here with the St. Louis Blues. How you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. Thank you.
Absolutely. We're thrilled to have you. So let's start with the obvious. What was your first experience like getting a taste of the NHL life?
It was pretty crazy, I could say. I mean, if I think about my first game, I mean, I was pretty excited, stressful day. But, yeah, I mean, I think I got better through the games were going on and feeling more comfortable, too, and had a great opportunity at the end of the season to play with Tomer and Shannon. So just happy, yeah.
That feels like it was forever ago, doesn't it? That first game for you? Because, I mean, back in February, I guess it was. And, of course, it was against your former coach in juniors hockey, Patrick Waugh. So from your perspective, Zach, from that first game in the NHL till now, where do you think your game took steps?
I mean, I think for sure I get a lot more comfortable on the ice and confident. I think when you get in a new league, it's always like you got to adjust a bit and trying to adjust to the new level. And I think that's what I went through I could say like the 15 or 10, 15 first game, and I think in the last 10 or 15 last game I get more comfortable, and I think I can I brought a bit more my game into the NHL. I
talked to you a couple of weeks ago for our pregame show, and I just talked about the speed of the AHL versus the NHL, and you mentioned how AHL, and it's not supposed to be meant negative, but there's a lot more chaos in the AHL to where it felt like there was more structure, and that's got to play well for somebody who emphasizes their ability to shoot the puck, to have more structure in their game.
Yeah, exactly. I think the one thing that I really realized on that first game was like everyone was at the right place. Like you had that puck, and you know like that demon's gonna be there, or that winger, or that center. So yeah, I think the game it's different than the AHL. I think like you said, a bit more chaos in the AHL, but I mean it's you go there and you try to learn too, and I mean if you can produce and help your team to win some games in the AHL, I think you're gonna find your way in the NHL. You
had that opportunity to play with Tomer and Shin at the end of the season. What was that experience like for you to play with Robert Thomas especially? There's some data out there that's available publicly that says he's going up against some of the toughest matchups in the NHL, so you were a part of that with him. What was that experience like for you?
It was a great experience. I mean, I think I did well too, and these guys are amazing players. I mean, there's so much talent, and it's so easy to play with them. Like I just said, they're always at the right place, and they talk a lot on the ice. So, you know when you got time, when you got pressure, and for me, it was just find the open space to try to shoot the puck. And I think Shenner and Tomer are both really good playmakers. So, yeah, I think kind of built a little chemistry through those last game, and yeah, I think really happy of the opportunity that I had.
Is that a mindset, Zach, for you to, because once you get to the NHL level, you're playing with all of these veterans, and it's like, okay, I need to shoot the puck, but I also don't want to put my team in a bad spot. Is that a mindset that you have to work yourself through of like, okay, hey, I get the opportunity, I need to shoot this puck?
Yeah, like I said, I think that those 10, 15 game, you get more comfortable, confident, and trying to kind of realize that these guys are your teammate, and like they want you to use your strength. And so I think like I said, in the first month probably that I was here, I was trying to looking for passes and everything to the older guy, but I think at the end I was pretty comfortable, and I knew what I want to bring to that team, and I'm a guy who can skate, I'm a guy who can shoot, so that's the thing that I want to do, yeah.
And some of those shot selections that you had, they weren't like from the outside. I mean, I specifically remember, I think it was that Anaheim Ducks game to where you had the puck in front of the net and you made the deke move and went to it. Is that an area that you're comfortable going to the front of the net in that gritty area?
Man, I mean, I think it's a area you got to go if you want to score goals in the NHL. I think you won't always score some one-timers goal from the top circle, or so you gotta find some ways to produce and score some goals. And I think like you said, in front of the net, it's a good area.
What did you learn about yourself, whether it was on the ice or off the ice, in your first experience in the NHL?
On the ice, I think I realized that I'm a pretty good skater when I'm using my skating, and I think I can be like a good guy on the forecheck to kind of recover that puck. And off the ice, I mean, just watch the pros every day, like the way they prepare themselves, the way they take care of their body. And I mean, like I said, every time I was going on the ice, I just want to learn from the older guy and try to get better.
How important is that, Zach? Because I remember talking to Patrick Waugh when he was here with the Islanders, and he said the one thing about your game was you were always in his office talking about, like, hey, how do I take my game to the next level? What do I need to work on? What do I need to watch? How has that changed for you at the NHL level in terms of, do you have more access to film that you can look at? Do you have more access to different training methods that you can go through?
Yeah, like you said, I've done a lot of video with Patrick back in the junior, and we had like probably once a week a meeting or just video of finding ways to get my game better. And I mean, I love watching my game. I love watching NHL. I try to learn from everyone around the league and get better. And I think, yeah, I mean, we have access to game in the junior too. So
yeah,
this is one thing that I've done, and I'm gonna still doing it. Yeah.
Who are some of the guys that you enjoy watching the most? Maybe not necessarily to emulate your game after them, but the guys that you just like watching in the NHL right now.
Well, a guy like McDavid's for sure. He's doing a lot of highlights and everything.
Sure.
But also a guy like McKinnon. I mean, I think he's a little bit like McDavid, but like I feel he's more powerful and physical into his game. So I think these are two guys that I really love watching, and like I said, they do a lot of highlights, and it's pretty nice to watch.
So we were talking a little bit before we went on the air, and Zach, you're going to go back to Springfield for the last couple of games and then wrap up the season. So take us through, what does off-season mode look like for Zach Bolduc? Because I would imagine this is a new territory for you compared to what it was last year of going in juniors and then the Memorial Cup and then all of the tournaments you played in.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a longer summer for sure for me. So I'm just trying to probably get a bit of rest for, well, I'm going in Springfield for 2 games, but after that I'll probably get a little bit of rest, and yeah, I'm trying to skate once or 2 times a week during the summer, and for sure train in the gym. Yeah.
Is there anything in particular that you're going to be trying to do with your game this offseason to bring that with you next season? Anything that you're going to be specifically working to improve on?
I think one thing is probably my strength off the ice and my puck protection. I mean, I think if you can like protect the puck and hold on the puck a bit more in the NHL, I think good thing can happen to you. So I think this will be my focus, and for sure you always want to get better at shooting, skating, or even watching games or watching players. So these are my plans for this summer.
Now the important part, you got a lot of TV shows and movies in the queue that you need to watch in the off season to catch up with?
Honestly, I'm not watching a lot of TV during the summer. I try to enjoy the weather and the friends and the family. So, I think I've done a lot of watching during the season. So I'll try to enjoy the weather and the outside during the summer.
You've got a LeBron shirt on, though. Yeah. Are you a big NBA guy?
No, I'm not. I'm just love the T-shirt.
Big T-shirt guy. That's fine. Hey, I got a T-shirt. I got a T-shirt of Willie Nelson. I don't listen to Willie Nelson, but I think it's a great looking T-shirt.
I respect it. I wasn't sure if you were a big LeBron guy and maybe you're going to be paying attention to the postseason. I get it, man. Zach, hey, we appreciate the time. Congratulations on your rookie season coming to an end. We are certainly looking forward to seeing you next year as you continue to progress in the NHL. Thanks for taking the time today. We'll talk with you again soon.
Thanks, guys.
There you go.
Got it. Zach Bolduc, Blues forward. Appreciate him hopping on with us today. We'll be joined by a bunch of players throughout the day here on BK and Ferrario. Coming up at 12:30, Doug Armstrong will have his press conference. We'll play that in its entirety right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. We'll be right back here on BK and Ferrario.
picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario, live from the Car Shield studio on 101 ESPN.
Alongside Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. We've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. We'll be joined by another player here in just a little bit here on BK and Ferrario. Again, Doug Armstrong's press conference live from the Centene Community Ice Center. That'll be at 12:30. We'll play that in its entirety here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Alex, we had Nathan Walker in person. We had Zach Bolduc in person. Hoping to have a couple of more players walk through here in the coming minutes here on 101 ESPN. I want to start by talking about what we just heard from Zach Bolduc, because I don't know if you felt the same way, but watching him this season, given what the scouting report was and all of the questions that we heard, especially from when Craig Berube was here about his game, about how, hey, we need you to go to the dirty areas. We need you to get more comfortable being more of a power player as opposed to a finesse player on the outside. I was surprised by his game. And frankly, pretty impressed by what we saw from him, especially in his time on that top line with Robert Thomas and Braden Shin. What did you make of your first extended impression from Zach Bolduc this year?
Very impressed, because I'll admit it. I thought he was more like a Jordan Kyrou type of player that was a perimeter guy, used his speed, only really focused on the offense and wasn't focused on other areas. And this is why, you don't go off of judgment alone. But when I first saw him, and, he even mentioned it, you're a little hesitant at the beginning. 13 games, his first 13 games, he did pick up a goal and 3 points. But only had 15 shots on goal. So we're talking about a shot a game. Now, if you look at his final 13 games of the season, you're talking about a guy who picked up 23 shots in 12 games. So you saw that progress there. Here's the part that got me with Zach Bolduc. And he mentioned it there. Nathan MacKinnon's a guy he likes to watch because of how he uses his power and his strength, and he said he's going to focus on that in the offseason. Zach Bolduc took the opportunities to go to the front of the net. And I think that's a very important thing. You don't have to be a power forward to do that. You got to be a guy who has a presence of the offense. And Zach Bolduc recognized about 12 games in that, hey, if I go to the front of the net, more goal-scoring opportunities are going to be there. He's a guy that I don't know what the ceiling is for him. I feel a lot of David Perron in his game. And I feel like I'm talking to David Perron when I'm talking to him. But think about it. Like, what we talk about David Perron so much was he was a pest to play against. He was so hard to get off of the puck, and he had a crazy strong shot. That could be a Zach Bolduc. And I told you in the break, I think the way that he played this season, specifically his final 5 games where he picked up 5 points in 5 games playing on the top line with Thomas and Shen, I think he could provide what Blues fans thought Jakub Vrana was going to provide this season. And now you're talking about another 20, maybe 25 goal scorer.
Yeah, I think he has that in his future. I don't know if that's as soon as next year, but maybe it's, 15 to 20 next year, and then it's 25-ish in the future. I think he could have some Brandon Saad to his game. Like, if I told you, Alex, that Zach Bolduc 3 years from now ends up becoming basically what Brandon Saad has been for the majority of his career, where it's somewhere in the 20 to 25 goal range and 40 to 45 points. Would you consider that to be a success?
Oh, absolutely. Second season, first full season, I absolutely would consider that a success. I'm talking
that's the long-range outcome. You're probably, like, the ceiling isn't a 35-goal scorer, but he becomes that consistent 20 to 25-goal guy.
Yeah, I think that would be a success. I think I would be hoping for a little bit more from him, but that's the type of guys that I think you need in the middle of your roster who can provide you depth.
That's how I feel as well. I think we, a lot of the time, not necessarily you, Alex, but I'll speak for myself, and I think media in general, I think we overstate how often a player reaches that ceiling of 35-plus goals. And so we just assume, hey, big-time prospect for your team, 35 goals. That's just going to be in their future. For most players, that's not in their range of outcomes. For most players, A really good season is 20 to 25 goals. Brandon Saad ended up becoming a player that could get $4 to $5 million regularly throughout his NHL career because teams will pay for that kind of proven production. And if Bolduc becomes that guy and he's consistent with it and he does it early in his career for the Blues, you're now getting $4 to $5 million of production for $1 to $2 million over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing that allows you to then go spend the money that you're saving from that spot in your lineup on a defenseman or on a number 2 center or on a legitimate $8 to $10 million top line forward. That gap between what you are paying and what you should have to pay for this kind of production changes the way that you can build around them. That's the case for Zach Bolduc. It's the case for Jake Neighbors. It could be the case for a Matt Kessel, who maybe ends up being a top 4 defenseman for, $1 million, $2 million bucks a year. Those are the kinds of things that really change the way that you're able to build your roster.
Yeah, when you pull up what Scott Wheeler had originally said about Zach Bolduc when he was drafted, he said Bolduc has the tools to give him the upper hand in downhill battles. When defenders are flat-footed, he has the ability to rush past them. He can dangle, he can stick handle, and when he gets the open shooting lane, he can take a couple of steps, kick a leg back, and sling pucks past goaltenders. So that's the goal-scoring aspect. I think in Bolduc, like the ceiling, I think he's a 30-goal scorer because he's got the shot to do it. We've seen it already this season. The question is, where does your game go from here? Do you become a guy who's willing to go to the front of the net a little bit more? Do you become a guy who's willing to go in on the forecheck like a David Perron used to do? Because if you can, then I think you're looking at consistent 30 goals. If you're telling me that the career of Zach Bolduc is every season 20 to 25 goals, I think that is a success for the Blues because that's a 17th overall pick. You know how many 17th overall picks don't even make it in the NHL? And Bolduc being a 20 to 25 goal scorer on a consistent season, that's $4 to $5 million, and that's depth. But I also feel like there's a higher ceiling for him, and hearing him talk about how his focus this offseason is protecting the puck going into the offseason and working on the strength. Typically, guys like Bolduc go into the offseason and work on their shot, work on their ability to stick handle a little bit more. It sounds like this guy's going to bring another element into his game.
Can I read you the entire list of Blues players that have had at least 30 goals in a season in the last 20 years?
Hit me with it.
Jordan Kyrou, Pavel Buchnevich, Vladimir Tarasenko, Alex Steen, David Backes, Brad Boyce.
Yep.
That's it. It is a really difficult thing to do, man. And so if that becomes his ceiling, it tells you that he is a legitimate, and I mean legitimate for a championship contending team, top 6 winger. I did the same thing with Jake Neighbors, and I will do it with Zach Bolduc. I'll do it with whoever the next player is, Zach Dean or Jimmy Snuggerud. I'll do it with him. I'll do it with Dvorsky. I always set the bar a little lower, or I try to at least, until I get carried away because I see them for a longer period of time. And then you see him score like 5 goals in 5 games. You're like, oh, 50 goals scored.
Like Nolan Gorman, 50 home runs.
Yeah. I try to set the bar a little lower because it is really hard to clear a 30-goal production type of a season. Mm-hmm. It is really, really, really hard to do. And so for Bolduc, my expectation going into next season is like 15 goals. My hope and belief is that eventually he can become a 20 to 25 goal scorer. And if it becomes more than that, hot damn, you hit the absolute jackpot.
Absolutely.
He's Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in about 15 minutes or so, we'll hear from Doug Armstrong as he has his end of season press conference. Coming up next, we're hoping to be joined by another player here on BK and Ferrario.
Blues talk more often. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Alongside Alex Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. You've got BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. In about 10 minutes, Doug Armstrong is going to be speaking to the media at his press conference, his end-of-season annual press conference. All the players have left at this point. We will be joined, by the way, on BK and Ferrario by Doug Armstrong coming up at 1 o'clock. And Blues head coach, interim head coach, Drew Bannister will join us at 1:30. So stay tuned for all of that. Plenty of Blues reaction to the end-of-season press conferences right here on 101 ESPN throughout the day, but certainly you're on BK and Ferrario as we are broadcasting live from the Centene Community Ice Center in the E&B Granite Studios. Alex, Robert Thomas did speak to the media, and our own Grant Francis was there to be able to talk with him a little bit earlier today. He talked a little bit about the culture. This was certainly a conversation this time last year and how they seemingly got it back on track with their season in 2024. Here's Robert Thomas talking about the culture that has now been established again.
No, I wouldn't say culture change. I would say, kind of like a rejuvenation. If that's the right word, I don't know. I'm just going to throw it out there. But, I think, you can build up a culture for so long, and all it takes is, one bad season to kind of rip it back down to the studs. But I think just, after the coaching change, you look at the teams we beat, our record, I think it's definitely building something. And I think that's what excites everyone in this room. We kind of just ran out of time at the end of the season there, but you can feel that culture coming back, and that's what's exciting to be here for a long time. Is you see that future and you see where the team's headed and the direction, and it's exciting.
So yes and no, what he said there. Like I do agree that one bad season ripped that culture out pretty quick. And, you had to regain it. And, yes, it did feel like you brought it back. And he's right. Like, you did run out of time. You just didn't give yourself enough games. My pushback on what he said there was, and this is maybe just my opinion, I also don't know if one bad season and then what you did this year just takes away what happened last season. Because, yes, you got close to the playoffs. Yes, you improved. But there are a lot of areas that were eerily similar to last season. And the culture side of it, you also struggled against the bad teams. And that's the part that, and I know it was a terrible question to ask Nathan Walker because, of course, if he knew the answer, they would play better against San Jose. I stumbled a bit on that one. But I think from what Robert Thomas is saying, like, yes, there's optimism that you're getting it back because you had a 11-point change. And we talked about it being a success. But if we are going to discuss culture, I think part of that culture still is figuring out how to get back because you weren't consistent this year. You had a lot of ups and downs, and you did struggle against teams that you should have been better than. That's the part that I think the Blues have to figure out as a group of staying focused from start to finish and not having those inconsistencies.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in what he said, though, because it did feel different this year. And even talking to the guys after this season, a couple of that we did, Nathan Walker, Zach Bolduc, hearing conversations with you, with Joey, with Curbs, people that are around the team, certainly more than I am. The vibe seemed to be a lot different this time around. And if you want to call that culture, you just want to call that like the feeling around the team. It was so much different in 2024 than it was last year. I remember, Alex, one of the biggest questions that I had whenever we came out here for Media Day prior to the season was, is this going to feel different this time around? Because if it doesn't, it's going to be miserable, dude. You can get through one of those seasons where everybody's just in a bad mood all the time because for whatever reason, things just don't go your way. If you have multiple of those years in a row, people just walk around with just like this scowl on their face after a while.
What?
And it sucks. You go to work every day and you're miserable. It feels like that's what's happening right now in Ottawa. I don't know if you saw it, but Jacob Chychrun was asked a little bit ago if he feels like he's going to be back next season. He's like, yeah, I don't know. I can't answer that right now.
He's going to be in St. Louis just like Brady Tkachuk.
Like, dude, that sucks. I feel bad for you. The players for Buffalo, they were asked at their exit interviews, hey, what do you want? They were like, hey, we need more accountability. Well, dude.
Do we got a guy for you?
You got 20 different coaches over the last 3 years. Feels like one of them maybe would have held you accountable, but whatever.
And at what point do you look at yourself and say, maybe we should hold ourselves accountable here?
It does feel like that has changed, and that the feeling around the team is different this time. He mentioned the difference between the Blues record prior to and after the coaching change. They were 30-19-3 as a team after the coaching change. For points percentage-wise, people that are more interested in that, it's a 602 points percentage. For context, this year Nashville was at 604 on the season. So essentially, post-coaching change, you were Nashville in terms of the points percentage that you were able to maintain. Now, how did that happen? Well, you still stunk at scoring goals, but goals against, you were 12th in the NHL, man. You allowed 2.8 goals per game after the coaching change, and then you had a totally average power play and penalty kill. And for the first portion of the season, you were abysmal on the power play. After the coaching change, they were right around 80% on the penalty kill. They were about 25% on the power play. They were 13th in the NHL on both of those special teams areas. You just became like a solid all-around team. You had really good goaltending, solid on special teams. They've got to figure out the 5-on-5 play.
Yeah.
If they can improve their 5-on-5 play this offseason, they get the right coach in here, whether that's Bannister or somebody else, this is a team that can make the playoffs next year.
Yeah. They absolutely can make the playoffs, and that's why I think this offseason is so intriguing, because you're talking about a couple of tweaks in certain areas, and you're talking about this team putting themselves in a playoff position.
He's Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, we're going to play the entirety of the Doug Armstrong postseason press conference for you right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN.
wall Blues coverage is right here. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
All right, broadcasting live at the E&B Granite Studios out of the Centene Community Ice Center. Doug Armstrong is speaking with the assembled media here right now. We will go ahead and play that press conference in its entirety here on BK and Ferrario.
And they went a different direction, and that obviously changed the outlook of what they were looking to accomplish this season and moving forward. But when I look at our team, I was probably a little too honest on where I thought we were going to be. I was trying to give everyone a look into how I viewed things, and it was brought up on a few different occasions that I didn't believe in this team or I didn't trust this team, and that wasn't what I was trying to say or get at. But I thought the guys played well. I thought, we're right dead smack in the middle of the league. If we're in the other conference, we're still playing, but we're not. We're in the West. I had a meeting with our pro scouts today, just projecting what it's going to take next year. I think the reason there's a less point total in the Eastern Conference is because you look at the teams that have been rebuilding or retooling. They're 6, 7, 8 years into it, and they all had about the same amount of points we did, maybe 4 or 5 less, maybe some 10 less. But there seems to be the Western Conference has teams earlier in the rebuild process, which means there's more points needed to get there because they're distributing more points through the Western Conference that they play more often. But with our team, I thought that. As I said, I thought we saw some really good things. I was extremely proud of the way the guys played against the top teams. And we have to grow and learn why we can play at a certain level against a certain group of player and organization and team, and what we have to do to prepare and to execute better against a team that maybe we don't have that fear factor in. And I'm hoping those are learning things that we're going to pick up.
Doug, can you just clarify what's happening with the head coaching position?
Yes, so I talked to Drew actually a while ago, recently in the last week or so, told him that he's going to be a candidate for the head coaching job. I feel that for the process, it's necessary to interview a few people. But what I told him was when we made the coaching change, I was creating a list, and the list was deep and extensive. And as I watched him perform and I watched our team perform, I started to cross names off that list. And now Drew is one of a very small number of people I want to talk to about moving forward. I thought he did a very good job. I thought he was able to put a balance of pushing and prodding to get the best team on the ice every night, with also throwing a little bit of hope out there and a blind eye to putting young players in situations they haven't been in and living with the results. And I think that's how you grow. We had some young players do some really good things, and we had some young players make young mistakes that cost us, but that's part of growth. And that's what I thought Drew did a great job of doing. And so to answer that question, Drew was a finalist for the head coaching position, and that list isn't extensive.
Doug, I was going to get into that, all part of it, but do you need some time to take before you make this decision, or do you feel like you've got a pretty good pulse of where you want to go?
I think we have a good pulse. I'm fortunate to have an inner circle of people in our organization that I trust, that have a lot of experience, that we've been talking about this for a number of months on where we want to go to, and as that was going, as I said, Drew was expanding his own resume. It's not something I think is going to happen over the next 4 or 5 days. You want to, I'm not going to get specific names, but some of the names that I want to talk to aren't available, and their teams are playing, and some of the names that I want to talk to, I'm going to give a little bit of time to. So it's not something. We certainly will have a head coach in well before the draft. I'm thinking well before June 1st, but I'm not putting a timeline on it in that because it's not an extensive group. I think when you look at maybe some of the coaches, the people in this situation, they're just starting the process and they might have 15 names and might want to talk to 8 or 9. I've whittled that down to, as I said, a very, very small number.
Would you consider consulting with the league to find out about Joel Quenneville's status?
I'm not going to get into individual names on what we're going to do on anyone, quite honestly.
What's kind of the criteria for you for the Nets head coach?
I think it's someone that we can that understands where we're at in our maturation process, that wants to push and build and create a foundation that can stand the test of time. Wants to have the respect of the veteran players, but the ability for the younger players to express themselves and grab a bigger role. And that's a difficult task. I think when you can go to a certain coach and you know what their mindset is, it's I have the team that I think can win the Stanley Cup, and here's the guy that can get us over the next 3 or 4%. I believe in our team, but we're not at that level quite yet. So that removes a coach that would fill that criteria. So this coach we want to come in, has an understanding of pushing and prodding and expectations of a fan base that should have expectations, but also knowing that we are in the process of doing something that's sustainable and allowing learning and growth to happen.
Doug, along those lines, you said at the beginning of the year you wanted the team to be competitive, but also put the focus on the future. Now that you've had a full year to see how that played out, even though you finished outside the playoffs and you might get a middle of the first-round draft pick, do you still feel like that's the best plan for the organization and sustainable moving for the next couple of years?
Yeah, only because, JR, you can do what we're doing, or you can get committed to one of the other two ways. Getting committed to winning the championship is trading those players that we've acquired, getting into that market and trying to push with a group that we believe is in our core, in our prime, and is going to push for it. Or, like, I want to say this politely, I'm not sure our fan base, and I'm not sure I could handle it. Take 15 more losses off of this season and do that for 5 more years. I'm not really sure we want to have a point total in the 50s and 60s for 4 or 5 more consecutive years to build something that might be good in 2035. So we're trying to do something that's difficult, which is stay competitive and find good players and make good trades. And win a championship. But my personal belief is that going the other way and being a 50 to 60 point team until 2029 to gain those assets. I mean, you look at Pittsburgh and they're at the tail end of what they did with, getting Malkin and getting Crosby and getting Fleury and getting Whitney. That's 4 years. That's 4 years of top picks. Taves and Kane, there's pain that goes into those things. and so I'm not in the position to think that's the direction the St. Louis Blues should go in. Obviously, I make recommendations or a game plan, and I filter that upstairs, and I do show them the 3 different categories. One is to move our first round picks, to move our top prospects, to get into a market and get a player, or the other one is to move anyone with any value or high value and replace them with American League players. Because if you took our top 4 players, I'll let you pick whoever they are. If you took our top 4 players and traded them, and you got young assets and futures, and you replace them with American Hockey League players or less, we can get to 50 points. I can get us there, trust me. It's getting us out of that after is the hard part. But I just don't think that's where we need to go. So that's a long answer to a simple question. We're going to stay with the path we're on.
You're listening to the live end-of-season press conference from Blues General Manager Doug Armstrong on 101 ESPN.
How do you guys improve enough to be a playoff team next year?
Well, it's going to come from internal growth, as we talked about a second ago, is that I was probably too open a year ago on a time length of retooling or what it's going to take. Like the history goes, though, in 22, 23, I thought we were a good team that underperformed, but I thought 23, 24 was going to be the first year of the next wave, because the players that if we had to perform to their maximum ability, they would have gone on a playoff run last year, and then they'd be free agents and they'd be gone. So this was year one of something that's not going to be finished after year one. And so we can look to be prudent in the free agent market. We need internal growth. We need, some of our players, veteran players, to play a little bit better. Some of our younger players to grow a little bit. The coach has to get a little better. The manager has to get a little bit better. But we're not going to reinvent the wheel. There is a plan in place, and I'm willing to stick through that plan. And one of the things we talked about, I think, in September is how do you judge a good season? And I understand our fan base, and I do understand that they want to see W's. They don't want to see the old college try. But when I evaluate it, I did see a lot of positives. I saw a young player like Jake Neighbors go from a call-up player to a fourth-line player to almost a 30-goal scorer. I saw Joel Hofer go to his first year in the NHL. Looks like a pretty good goalie. We saw Scott Prunovich play, and now we know what we have and closer to what we have. So I found positive things in outside of wins and losses that I think we can build off of.
Do you think the roster will be largely the same, though? Is that your expectation?
I think how do I want to say it? I don't want to say something that's going to come back and I'm going to answer to in September. I just think that we're on a path, and we're willing to stick with that path. And if we can improve our team under the guidelines that we think gives our long-term outlook and our long-term goals the best chance to have success, we'll do it.
You talk a lot about the internal growth. One player that gets talked about a lot is Jordan Kyrou. How do you assess his season, and what kind of growth would you like to see from him going into next season?
Yeah, another 30-goal season. Obviously, I thought he went through stretches this year where the puck didn't go in for him at the start of the year. I think if you look at all the fancy stats, he had a lot of chances, and they weren't going in, and then they start going in, and everybody gets off his back a little bit. So I think consistency maybe is something, but he's a game-changing player and a game-breaking player that has become a lightning rod for whatever reason. But I sat up here, and I'm going to say 2017, and Jay Bolduc was a lightning rod, and everybody hated him. And then he left our franchise, and everyone thought, how are we going to live without Jay Bolduc? So these are ebbs and flows. A year ago, Colton Parayko and Jordan Binnington were finished, and now they're not finished. So I can't get sucked into this daily, he's a good player, he's a bad player thing that's there. I have to have a longer term approach, and if you want to have a relationship with someone, you better be willing to go through tough times if you want to go through good times with them. If you're only committed to someone through the good times, it's going to be a difficult relationship for you to be happy in.
Coach, not Coach. Army, you talked
about... That will never happen, Coach, by the way.
You talked about internal leadership, and a big part of that is the captain of the team. How would you assess, maybe from your point of view, how Braden Shen did this year, leading this group, especially through a coaching change and some struggles?
Yeah, I thought he did a really good job. I think the one thing that when I look back on him, when I talk to him, and is that breathe, enjoy the process, and don't take don't put too much of this on yourself. I thought he cares so much about the team and so much about every individual that it's hard to do all that and still be the best you can be on the ice. And I thought he did a great job at it. I think next year he's gonna be able to pick his battles a little bit more, pick his battles with the manager, pick his battles with the coach, pick his battles with his teammates a little better. And that just comes from maturation. But a proud player and a Stanley Cup champion that's asked to be the captain of a team that's going through a transition, it's difficult. And then you throw in a coaching change mid-season. It's not like I made this easy on him, and it wasn't by like I didn't say let's name Shen our captain, see how hard I can make it on him. But I'm not surprised that it ended up where there was a lot of turmoil that he had to deal with, and I thought he did a really good job, and I think, quite honestly, with the support of Robert Thomas and Parenko and Falk, that eased that for him. And I think they've all grown, and they're all going to get better at it. And next year is going to be way easier for them than this year was, and that's growth.
Doug, you mentioned when you made the coaching change that you wanted accountability and competitiveness from the Nets head coach. How do you think Drew handled that?
I thought he did a nice job at that, and the last time I was sitting in here, we were talking about the coach, and it was a coaching change, and then I reflect back on what was said after that. But change came because there was a feeling that the message wasn't getting through, and it was frustrating to hear that because of how much respect I have for Craig, but I think also that change made everybody get a little more laser focused in every area. It made the manager get more focused. It made the players get more focused, and I thought those were natural byproducts of competitiveness and opportunity. And I thought Drew provided both of those things, and I thought he did a good job at that. But I did think that accountability was taken up. But I think that was going to come regardless. It wasn't really Drew that took it up. It was the players that understood that they let a guy that everybody in this city loved and they love playing for, and I love working with. We let him down, but that's evolution of sport. That's not new to any one organization. So I thought the players did a great job of seizing that, and I think we might have been 11 games over 500 with Drew, and that's good coaching, but that's also laser focus of players wanting to be different than they were before.
You're listening to the live end-of-season press conference from Blues General Manager Doug Armstrong on 101 ESPN.
Defense was better this year. I know last year you said that if we watch the same thing this year, there's definitely going to be changes in 24-25. How do you evaluate the defense this year, and do you anticipate trying to make it look any different?
It will look, well, it looked a little different because Scotty was healthy and we got him a lot of games and we saw what that looks like. We're going to look to see if we can push and prod and improve, but there was an improvement back there. I think some of the improvement came from how our number one defenseman was perceived at the end of last year and the way he's perceived now. I assume it's different. The questions are different, at least. I think Tucker showed he can help us out a little bit. I think Letty and Parenko look like they can be a good pair. I think I was really excited for Kessel's growth and improvement. A player that we weren't talking about at the start of last year came in and looks like a legitimate NHL player. So there's going to be internal growth, and if we can improve it other ways, we'll look at doing it. Again, I don't want to say anything that I can't back up on change.
Doug, with where you guys are at as a franchise, do you expect to be a cap team next year?
It's not a goal not to be, and it's not a goal to be. Like if there's a player, if there's a situation that I can take to Mr. Stillman and he signs off on that adds a player with X amount of millions of dollars that takes us to the cap, I'll do it. But I'll get no benefit of spending money poorly so I can say next year, well, look at we're at the cap. Like we're trying. Trying stupid isn't trying. That's just being stupid. And so if the owners have never said, no, you can't spend, My job is to provide a roadmap where it's spending wisely.
Doug, did any of the prospects, and we know you've never rushed any of these guys to get here sooner than they should be, did any of them have years this year where some of them may expedite the process, though?
Yeah, I would say from last year's draft, like Bolduc and Dean and Kessel are here now. They finished here, so I'm going to exclude those guys. I can talk to them after if you want. But last year's draft was really the first draft of whatever the working in the next generation. And the one player that looks like he's going to push for a really good look in training camp is Dvorsky. Partly because he's in North America and the other guys are in Sweden. But Dvorsky, when I saw what he did at the World Junior, what we see him doing against his peer group in the Ontario Hockey League, and how we've seen players that do what he did in the Ontario League progress to the NHL, there's a path there. But that path won't be rushed, so we can say that we have young players in the NHL. And that's for Bolduc, and that's for Dean, and that's for Kessel, quite honestly. Like, they ended the season here. The only way they guarantee they started here next year is to have a great summer and a great training camp, because we have to push them to be better than they were when we ended the year, and it's up to them to do the work. Now, I have the utmost faith they're going to do it, but it's not. This isn't a charity case that we're running here in the extent that, in the sense that to show growth, we have to put players in the NHL that aren't ready for it. I think, Lou, you and I have talked about this before. The NHL fails as many players as players fail the NHL, and I don't want to fail these guys.
And Doug, does the Snuggerud decision affect your kind of future planning? Was he kind of in next year's mix, ideally?
He would have been in the mix to the level that Bolduc and Dean are, that there's an expectation that they're going to give. There's not a hope that they make the team. There's an expectation they're going to give every opportunity to. So he would have been in that group ahead of the Stenberg-Lindstein, where they're a year or two away. Snuggy's going to be in many this time next year, one way or the other, in the Final Four as in a Blues uniform.
Doug, your recent history of hiring head coaches is guys with previous NHL experience. Is that a prerequisite for this search here?
No.
Two questions. One, you brought up Dvorsky. How much do you think he benefited? I mean, obviously the numbers were great, but going from Europe to playing junior this year?
I thought it was a great benefit, and JR, that's a really good question, because you never know how it's going to work. The one thing I don't like about, I said don't like, that concern you is Dvorsky's had 5 different coaches in the last 5 years in 5 different cities and 5 different leagues. Like, this kid's had no stability. And it's because he's better. He gets better every year. And so he went to a situation he thought was going to be really good in Sweden. It was really bad. And then, so you're hoping it's better when he gets to the OHL, and he made it a great situation. So the way that he was perceived in his draft year as a top player, top 10 pick, that's where we took him. They usually have good years in the OHL, and he certainly didn't disappoint. And I think there's going to be debate if the draft was held again this year, where would he go? Probably, in our opinion, maybe a little bit higher, but certainly no lower.
I just had one other quick one. I know this isn't on your radar. We get asked this question a lot, so I figured I'd pass it off to you. The option of a buyout, with players that you have, do you even consider that this offseason with any of your players?
Yeah, I consider it every year. It's not. This isn't an ego thing where we don't buy somebody out. It has to make economic sense. Not just economic sense. There has to be a plan to have a better team because you're doing it. And it's my fault because I do make statements and then I don't retract them, or I don't change the it's like, well, we don't offer no move clauses. Well, that's a lie. Like I said, I don't like to do it, and we don't offer signing bonus. Well, that's a lie. We've done it. So we've done it in the past. When I say that's not our first preference to do these things, so it's not our first preference to buy players out. Maybe this is the ego part. It is a business, and it's hard. I don't know. It's just like kids just say, like, give me $1,000, I want to burn it. Like, I'm not going to give you $1,000. You know, and when you buy a player out, it's like burning money. And so I have an obligation to make sure it's the right thing to do. But no, nothing is off the table.
Another question or two? Doug, on Dvorsky, is he eligible to go to the AHL next year?
Yes, yes, just because he was drafted from Europe, yeah.
Would that be a logical step for him? I mean, seeing what he's done in the OHL, and if he's not here in St. Louis?
He thinks he's going to be here in St. Louis, and I'm not going to dash that dream. But if it's not, we'll find a nice home for him.
What about your plans for Pavel Buchnevich? Will you approach him over the summer and try to lock him up, or see how the season plays out?
Yeah, we'll approach him. I'm a big Pavel fan. Again, with free agency, it's a two-way street. He's just turned, I think, 29 yesterday. You know, if I was Pavel, I would want to sit with the manager and talk to him, not as a like, he's at the age now where he should ask me hard questions about the direction of this organization, because he's at the age now where winning well, I shouldn't say I assume winning is going to be very important, and he wants to know how quickly we can win. That, you know, because he's going to get his money. You know, he's good enough, he's going to get his money. So I would like him to be here. I have to sell him on why, and then we have to sell each other on why we can be comfortably uncomfortable with the financial deal that we make. But I'm a big Pavel fan.
So just when you look at the 5-on-5 possession numbers from the season, what did you think was missing from your team at even strength there?
The one area where I like to see us get more comfortable at is putting pucks on the net from high scoring areas. I think as you guys that follow us closely, you'll see us get the puck into a high scoring area, then pass it out of it for a better play. This league isn't always about a better play. And the other area where I think we can improve, and we saw it with Jake Neighbors and Torpachenko to a level, you got to go like you know, you got to go to the hard areas to score. Like Jake Neighbors, what did he get? How many goals? 27 goals. From me to this microphone away, total distance. Like he goes to the areas to score that are hard. And so those numbers, I think if we put pucks at the net and go to that net with greater urgency and frequency, that's going to improve. I don't think possession time is important, but if it's possession time without any results, it's just hanging on to the puck longer before you give it away.
When you talk about those types of players, is that kind of the characteristic that you're looking for free agents or trades or what have you to bring in there?
Well, we want to get out of our own players first, but yeah, I think, you know, what we talk about, and this is, people are going to say this is a good stat or a bad stat since 2008. I don't think, you know, that we have one Hall of Famer in our group, but we've had a lot of wins. I know how I know how the St. Louis Blues are built, or I know how we have to be built to have success. Unless we want to go, what Jay and I asked about earlier, unless we want to go to the bottom for a number of years, that's sort of where you get your Hall of Famers from. Like you have a much greater likelihood to get a Hall of Famer for there. So we need strength in numbers, and strength in numbers comes from Bobby Plager playing for the jersey or the crest on the front and the name on the back. That's always been the identity of the Blues since I've been here. That's how we've had our success, and that's the path I hope that we take moving forward. Because as I said, it's a lot less. Like I'd love to draft. I'd love for Dvorsky to be Hall of Famer. I'd love for Robert Thomas to be Hall of Famer. I'd love for whoever to be. Just the reality is that it usually comes like from 1, 2, or 3 in the draft, and I don't want to pick that guy. No, I'm not afraid of winning the lottery if they want to do that part of it, but I don't want to earn it. How's that?
One very minor one on Theo Lindstein. Obviously, you guys signed him. What's kind of the path for him moving forward into next year as well?
I would see most of those guys going back to Europe and continuing to grow there. There is an agreement in the IIHF too that they have to go, or they can go back. They will go back. Again, we're not looking to rush guys in. The American League's a hard league to play in, not because it's a hard league in the sense that there's a lot of downtime for an 18, 19-year-old. And I just say we're talking about Dvorsky doing it. if he's not in the NHL. I think he can grow just from him and Stenberg, and that group can grow very well where they're at. Now, if things change and they want to come over here and give it a shot, like, we're not going to say no. But again, we're playing the long game here.
Last question.
Yep.
Doug, along those lines, with the guys in Europe, how much differently do you have to evaluate what they're doing over there as opposed to the guys you have over here in North America?
I don't think any differently. Like, the harder part, it's harder. Like, we see all their shifts. We get their shifts every week. We watch every shift. It's harder to get to see them, and it's harder to their mindset of how much they practice, how much they play is different than junior hockey. The hard part for the young top European players at 18 and 19 is they play in men's league and they don't get much ice time, and then they don't want to go down to the league to get more ice time because they feel they've underperformed. It's a delicate balance for those players, and what we want to see is continued growth, and that's where our development staff comes in. The hard part, it's not the NFL where you draft them and you see them and you know they're there and you can say it's success or failure within a year. These, like, and I projected a chart out to our ownership group, and it wasn't just our players. Like, when do players that are drafted within 15% plus or minus play their 11th game, their 50th game, their 100th game? It takes a while, and we're playing the long game. Again, thanks everybody for your support this year, and we'll see you later.
That was Blues general manager and president of hockey operations, Doug Armstrong, giving his end-of-season press conference. We'll take a break. We'll be back with BK and Ferrario. More after this on 101 ESPN.
St. Louis gets its sports. WXOS, WXOS HD1 East St. Louis, 101 ESPN. 101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Last night, the Blues wrapped up their season with a 2-1 shootout loss over the Dallas Stars. BK and Ferrario at their Centene Community Ice Center, where they have spoken to Nathan Walker and Zach Bolduc earlier. We just heard from General Manager Doug Armstrong, and the guys are continuing the conversation with him next. I'm Jordan Deacon. The Sports Center update was brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
We're back to more exclusive Blues talk. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Ferrario, I'm Brandon Kiley. We are happy to be pleased to be joined by the president of hockey operations, Doug Armstrong, as we are here for the Blues end-of-season press conferences at the E&B Granite Studios inside of the Community Ice Center, the Centene Community Ice Center. Doug, we appreciate the time as always. How are you doing today?
Yeah, so. Oh, yeah, there we go. Now we're good. There we go.
How are you doing? He said he's doing
Take
well.
two.
Same answer. I'm fine, thank you.
I'm going to ask you a simple question, and you can take it in any direction. Would you consider this season a success for the Blues from your perspective?
I would consider it a success in some ways, and obviously a failure because we didn't make the playoffs. And it was successful because we saw growth in players we wanted to see growth in. And it's also successful because we got answers to questions we wanted answered, some positive, some negative.
Sure.
But you have to gain answers to move ahead. And so I thought our it's such a hard question. It's a great question because I can answer it. I feel both ways about it. Like, so excited about how we played against the good teams. So excited when we were laser focused and understanding that embarrassment was just a puck drop away. We answered the bell. And then disappointed that we didn't perform well against teams that psychologically and arrogantly we thought we were better than. And we didn't. So it you get the positive, you get the negative. You see good growth in younger players. So it's a mixed bag. I wish I could say check one box, sure, that's successful or failure. To me, it was a mixed bag.
Well, you fit right in with us, Doug. We always ride the fence on every take that we have with this. The one thing is, as you would expect, retool, rebuild is discussed amongst fans. And I had a conversation with Doug Waite last week, and Waite explained to me, you don't understand, a rebuild is something that you're grooming young players that don't know what it takes to win. That takes a long time. He said retools go fast. And he said it doesn't feel like they do because you hate losing, but retools go fast. Is that where your mindset is?
Yeah, well, I heard your conversation or heard you talk about your talk with Dougie, and I agree with him. And it's one thing putting young players in a position that they can learn. You first got to get those young players.
Right.
And that means, and I was talking to guys earlier today, if we wanted to do a total rebuild, you'd have to take 15 to 20 losses off of this team and do it for the next 4 years. Mm-hmm. That's 50 to 60 points. And I did say tongue-in-cheek, if you want to get there, I'm your guy. I can figure out a way to get to that.
I can do it.
But that doesn't guarantee anything either. That's the tough part is, you see teams around the league, yes, you lose those games, and then you potentially get the players, but there's no guarantee those guys become what you're hoping for either. That's the scary part about the rebuild.
Yeah, well, and I do believe, the easiest thing is to commit the time and get the assets, and then you have to build a team off of that, and that's where the change happens. It's the elite manager that can take it to the bottom, knows exactly who to draft all those guys, and then still be alive and around to turn them into different players. And when I got to St. Louis, I had never been part of anything like that. My years in Dallas, we were always competitive. And then when I got to St. Louis, they had made that commitment before I got here, so they had the first overall pick. And my job at that point wasn't to gain more top picks. It was to build a team. And so whether people like or dislike the decisions, we moved players to we moved the pieces around that we had drafted to build a team, and a team that we thought could have success. And so, but to answer, to talk to your part of the question, like you can't do a rebuild in a year. That's why I said it's 4 or 5 years, because you have to have 4 or 5 cracks at getting the right player.
Yeah.
Like there's a saying, like if you're only going to do it once, like you have to pick a great year to have a bad year, because some years it's Sidney Crosby, and some years it's not. and you can't control the skill level of the draft year. And some years it's a great draft, and if you're just there once, you might be able to get a Connor McDavid. But there are drafts when you look back, and let's say it's not 1, but it's 1 through 5. Like you can get to pick 3 a lot of years and get a very average player from 3 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get some years pick 6, 7, and 8 are great players. So that's why I think you got to, if you're going to commit to it, quite honestly, you got to commit like some teams did and just go right to the bottom for the better part of 4 or 5 years.
We're talking to Doug Armstrong here on 101 ESPN. I am curious, as you look towards the offseason, and I think you talked with Tom Stillman, and he said you're committed to this plan, and you've shown ownership kind of what the core group of players should look like as you continue to get into your winning window. As you go into this offseason and you think about the balance of trying to provide opportunities for young players, but also not expecting them to take that job right away, how does that influence your decisions, whether it's via free agency or trades, to make sure you have a roster in place that could win or at least compete if those young players don't take the next step versus giving those opportunities to the young players? How do you balance that in an offseason?
Well, I'll use an example this year of one of my favorite players, Blues of all time, Robert Bertuzzo. We thought that Matt Kessel was going to take his job at some point, but we wanted Matt Kessel to go down, and he play the first half of the season down there. Yep. Robert went on, Kessel came up. So there has to be growth. So that's how you do it. You protect yourself. So if you took Dvorsky, let's say at our 10th pick last year, to project him on our team would be a disservice to him. Give him the opportunity to make the team, for sure. But now, like with Bolduc and Kessel and Dean, we've seen enough now to I can envision them making our team. But if they don't do it, we still have to have competent players. And so it's finding that balance, and it's not as easy as it sometimes can be. But if a young player takes a veteran player's job, it's my job then to find a home for the veteran player.
When we talked earlier this season, Doug, you had discussed, the season that Robert Thomas is having, the season that Colton Parayko is having, the season that Jordan Binnington's having. You said it's my job to bring in the pieces that get those guys to winning because of how they're performing. Now, 82 games wrapped up, and you saw what Binnington and Parayko and Thomas did. Do you view the team a little bit differently than maybe you did at the beginning of the season?
Yeah, well, because I saw growth in Jake Neighbors. I think when we started the year, Jake Neighbors was a fourth-line player getting 8 to 11, 12 minutes, and quite honestly, that's what he'd earned. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, he gets his foundation. Now, he spent half the year in the minors a year ago. He comes up, he's a bit player, and to his credit, the door opened and he kicked it down to 27 goals. So he's another. So now I put Jake Neighbors in with those guys. What I wanted to keep doing is I put Kessel, not that he's a star, but I put him in with that group that you can continue to grow with. Sure. And I just want to keep adding to that group that you can continue to grow with. And now the next step is getting Bolduc and Dean into that group a little quicker, and then getting some of these Tucker into that group a little bit quicker, and making sure that the veteran players that we have here, that like Saad had a good year. I thought Leddy had an excellent year. Schenner's our captain. You got Falk had a great year last year, not quite as good a year this year. He had a lot of injuries to deal with. Like, you need a lot of things to go well, and then you need those guys to believe in what they're doing. And it's not for everybody, and that's why I got to make sure that, like, this is what we're doing, and it's only going to benefit the team if you agree with it, but it's only going to benefit you if you agree with it, because if not, you're a good enough player, I can find you a home, but we'd like it to be here, but only if we can find out how we're going to judge right from wrong and success from failure.
We're talking to Blues President of Hockey Operations, Doug Armstrong, here on BK and Ferrario. I did want to ask you about the number 2 center position. You guys had Pavel Buchnevich playing there at the end of the year. Is that what you view as his future home, or was that more of a placeholder situation and you're hoping to have somebody that might be more of a long-term answer there going into next season?
I think that either could happen, you know, and that's the hard part. So if you go out and sign a number 2 center, and we might do it, so I'm not saying we're not going to do it, because I hate to do this and then we do it and say, this guy's a liar.
People always have receipts on this, don't they,
yes,
Doug?
Yeah. But it's not about what's going to happen next year. It's like, how long do you stunt Dvorsky's growth? Because that has to be him. Like, if we're drafting the top 10 and he's not in that area, so if you go out and sign a guy at 27 or 28 to a 7-year deal, then all of a sudden Dvorsky's going to have to, someone's going to the wing at some point, because you don't want these good players, and that's what we found out Bucci can do, and that's what I think a lot of centermen like Dvorsky's age, they start on the wing and move into the middle. So I'm talking, because just in case we do it, I'd like to do it, but just, you know, that there's a plan that it's not like, oh, they signed a centerman and now Dvorsky's never going to play here, they got to trade him. That's not going to happen. But it's just, every decision has a longer term effect than the next year, and we just want to make sure that we're continuing to build moving forward. But the number 2 center part this year was a thing that seemed to be in flux right from day one.
On defense, Doug, we always talk about trends in the league, and at the end of the season, when the playoffs are done, everybody's always talking about how do we copycat the team that just won the Stanley Cup. Last year, it was size on defense. They had big players for Vegas, and we were talking about how, yeah, you need size on D. Do you feel like that's still necessary in the NHL, or is the trend kind of in the middle with NHL defensemen?
I think it's in the middle to smaller defensemen in the regular season. We'll find out how it is. Let's have this in June. But you get into 7-game series and you circle certain names and you can lean on them and you can grind them down. You know, whether it's a big defenseman or a big forward, they're just harder. They're harder to play against. Yeah. But some of the most electric and exciting offensive defensemen in our league right now are smaller. Now, and they're in the playoffs, most of them, if not all of them. We're going to see how they do in 7-game series. And Makar's not a big guy. It doesn't seem to affect him. You know, we're going to see how it affects. I don't want to name names, but I think we all know there's some really gifted offensive players that are smaller that have to play in 7-game series, and we're going to see how is their offense going to outweigh not their desire to defend, just their physical ability to defend.
We are going to see the cap go up a little bit more this year than we have in previous seasons. How do you think that will influence, not just for you guys, but for around the league, how do you think that will influence some of the offseason decisions that are going to be made this year compared to the past 2, 3, 4 years?
It's certainly going to open the valve up to spend more money. There's more money in the system. But if you look at, like, and I'm as guilty as the next manager. I'm not throwing anybody on the bus, but it doesn't take us long to spend it. Like, you look at some of the long-term extensions that guys, it's going up $4 million. How many players that we know have got $4 million raises? Yep. Like, quite a few. Yep. So whatever it's going up, they've taken. So their cap is basically flat. And so I think there's a belief that that there's going to be money flying all around. A lot of that's taken internally. And a lot of guys that have bit their lip and taken their kidney blows as the cap stayed flat are going to want to get paid. And so I think that I guess my point is the new money is going to go to a very small amount of people.
Doug Armstrong, we appreciate the time as always. We appreciate your candor and your honesty. Yes. I know the fans, I can tell you this from our personal experience, looking at the text line, hearing from all the calls. They appreciate the honesty about where you guys are in your build right now. So thanks for hopping on with us today. We wish you the best of luck this offseason. We'll talk with you again soon.
Always enjoy coming on, guys. Thank you for your support all year, too.
Thanks, Doug. That's Doug Armstrong, Blues President of Hockey Operations. We're going to be joined in studio coming up next by Blues interim head coach Drew Bannister here on BK and Ferrario.
Give us your opinion on the Air Comfort Service heating, cooling, and insulation text line at 314-399-9646 on 101 ESPN.
Purchase an HVAC system and receive a $1,600 rebate, a 16-year warranty at SwissAirSTL.com.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. 120,000 miles of night drives, daily commutes, and who knows how many.
Are we there yet?
Through countless fixes, elbow grease, and a new radiator, you kept your ride alive. With eBay Motors, you have over 122 million parts to keep it running. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, they'll be the perfect fit every time. Plus, at these prices, well, we're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply.
Free. Who doesn't love free? With Milo's Rewards, you get the member-only treatment that's actually worth it. Enjoy free member gifts you'll love. And once you reach Silver Key status, you can get free standard shipping. Because Lowe's knows nothing feels better than free. Learn more about our new loyalty program at Lowe's.com/MyLowe's Rewards today. Program subject to terms and conditions. See Lowe's.com/terms for details.
Wall-to-wall Blues coverage is right here. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Great to be out here at the Centene Community Ice Center as the Blues have their end-of-season press conferences. We heard from Doug Armstrong. We were joined in studio by Zach Bolduc earlier today, also by
Nathan
Walker. So it's been a really good day for us to be able to catch up with so many of the Blues. And now we are joined in studio by Blues interim head coach Drew Bannister, coming off of this season. Drew, we appreciate the time. How are you doing today?
Well, I mean, it's, these days are difficult. I think we're certainly not where we want to be today. We probably be wishing that we're sitting here talking about our first opponent in the playoffs. So I think, today's are difficult days when you come in and clean up and kind of, the reality hits you that your season's over and that you have a long summer ahead of you to kind of, obviously digest the year, and then refocus yourself on things that as a team that we have to do better and that we can be better at for next year when September comes around.
Drew, I was reading Matt DeFrank's piece on the Post-Dispatch just about the transition and the full year, kind of looking back for you, and you had mentioned the differences in terms of practice timing in the AHL versus the NHL, to where you said, like, typically in the AHL you have an entire week to practice before your games, and the NHL, not only did you start in the middle of the season, but you started with no practice time. That's not an easy task.
No, it isn't, and I think that was one of the adjustments that I had to make, for myself, and a little bit of an eye opener for me too. Just coming in and jumping right into the fire, having a morning skate with the guys, and then playing that night, and then just kind of playing like. You're playing almost every second day at this level. Where at the American League level, we might mix in a game on a Wednesday and play Friday, Saturday, and then you don't play until the next Friday. You're able to really break down your games over the weekend, focus, more on your team player, individual player, skill play for the development of those players. So that was the adjustment for me, I think, at the NHL level, was, making sure that one, we prioritize, as much practice time as we could get. When we had it, and then two, obviously getting the rest that the players need and deserve to make sure that they're rested, and then just focusing on our upcoming games or our previous games and meetings, and obviously video, and how you would go through that on a day-to-day process.
Drew, what did you learn about yourself this year as a head coach, doing it at this level? I'm sure you always had belief and confidence in yourself that you could get here, you could be successful when you did. But what did you learn about yourself in this experience?
Yeah, and I think that's an evolution of a coach, and as a young coach, I think my first opportunity to coach major junior hockey, coming out of as an assistant coach in Owen Sound, and getting that opportunity in the Sioux. There's always, not that there's doubt, but you're always going into the season, am I prepared? Am I ready for this? And I think once you hit the ground running, you're constantly learning. You're learning about your players, new players that you haven't coached before, and then you're starting to build relationships with them. And then the evolution of your coach and your relationship with your players just kind of takes over, and obviously a lot of confidence in yourself, and then in the team that you're leading in that season. And I think it was similar to my evolution from when I left Sault Ste. Marie to going to the American Hockey League, and again dealing with teenagers, and now dealing with grown men that have families, so that there was an adjustment there. And again, just the time, San Antonio, although it was in the American League, I think we had to travel a lot, so there was management of, usually our days off were spent in the air in San Antonio, which really took away from the development of our players at that time. And I think, certainly for me, and I think for the organization, that when we made that change from San Antonio to Springfield, we really saw like a big change in the development of our players, and the time that we were able to spend with those players on the ice. For instance, when I look at the travel, the only time we ever got on the plane was go to Charlotte, really. So we have Hartford, which is 30 minutes away. We have Bridgeport, that's an hour and a half away. We had Providence, that was an hour and 20 minutes away. So you were always going in and coming back. So you're always spending your time in bed. But then you had time for days off, for extra practice times, and we were able to break things up and have skill sessions to break up the monotony of just day-to-day kind of practices. So, and then what we talked about now, the difference between where I was at the American League level and the time management coming to the NHL. I mean, it's just an evolution of that, learning, getting better, making some mistakes as a coach, and then learning from them, and again, continuously getting better at each level.
Drew, you mentioned relationships with the players, and for somebody who's been in the OHL, the AHL, Doug spoke about, the qualities that he's looking for in the next permanent head coach is somebody who has the ears of the veterans but a pulse for the younger players. Do you feel like you built a relationship strongly with this roster?
Yeah, I think I think the one of the things that was the trip with made the transition, not that it was ever easy, but I think the relationships that I had built with a lot of the players that had come through, whether San Antonio or Springfield, that were already here in St. Louis, and then some of the players that came. So I had a lot of strong relationships with those players, and they knew who I was as a person. They knew who I was as a coach and the expectations I had. And, I talked about Jordan Binnington, in the previous press conference, Jordan was my goalie when I first became a coach in Owen Sound as an assistant coach. So we've kind of gone through this evolution together, and I went from Owen Sound to the Sioux, and then, my first American League coaching job was in San Antonio, where Binner was my goalie, and then my first head coaching job was in St. Louis, where Binner's a goalie. So, we talked about that today, and just the evolution of him and how he's grown as a man and a person and as a goalie. Just really proud to be a part of that and see his growth, and where he's come. So, to your point, the relationships for me, I think coming in, and having those relationships built before was made it a lot easier for me to connect with those players. And so a lot of my talks were with the older players, the leadership group that maybe didn't know me as much, and trying to build and start relationships with them.
Blues interim head coach Drew Bannister joining us here on BK and Ferrario for another few minutes. Drew, what has Doug Armstrong told you about what comes next for you guys in this process of potentially taking the interim tag off? Like, what does the next few weeks, couple of months look like for Drew Bannister in that regard?
Well, I think as Doug's kind of keeps things pretty close to himself. So, he from day one, he's been completely honest with me. There's been no expectations or no promises. There's been expectations of what he needed as me as a coach, and certainly to my ability, I believe that I was able to do a lot of those things. So we've built a relationship over the last 4 months where maybe we didn't have that previously, just because I wasn't working with him day to day. So I think Doug and I know each other. We built a strong relationship over the last 4 months of getting to know each other as people, and him getting to know me as a coach, and me vice versa as a general manager. As far as the process is just the process. It could take 2 days. It could take 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I don't know. But that's part of being a coach, and obviously for me, I'm excited to be a part of that process, and I'm proud to be a part of that process, and I'm very, very thankful for the opportunity from Doug and from Tom and the ownership and the rest of the management to give me that opportunity.
As a little bit of a follow-up on that, Doug talked today about how the growth this season that he saw in some of the young players was why he would consider this season to be a success. He saw it, you guys saw it from Jake Neighbors, you saw it from Matt Kessel, you saw it from Bolduc, for example. That can be difficult, though, as a coach, where your goal is to win every game, of course. Yeah. And so when you are in that role as the head coach of a team that is going through a bit of a retool where you are trying to grow with some of the young guys, what is that like for a head coach? Yeah,
I think I look at it a little bit differently. Like, I think for me, coming out of junior hockey, that's what it was about. Obviously that you want to win. But in junior hockey, it's a lot about development. You have to develop before you can get to that year. And I think, my first year in Sault Ste. Marie, we were a young team. I was not forced to play younger players, but I felt, at the end of the day, like, we're only going to be better in year 2 and year 3 by playing these players and building their games and gaining their trust. In that year 1, we were young. We ended up coming up against the number 1 team in the nation, which was Sarnia. I had a young Morgan Frost, who was a 16-year-old playing second line center, and we ended up beating that team out in 7 games in the first round. And, that was kind of the evolution of our team. And then we went on to, in our third year with that group, I think we lost four games that year. We won 25 or 26 games in a row at one point. Ended up losing in the finals, but it was the evolution of building that youth to get to that point. And a lot of the players, like when I look at the players that we've had Whether it's a Jakey Neighbors or a Torpo, a Kessel, a Tucker, Bolduc and Dean and Hofer. Like usually, for me in previous years, I'm watching them go up and I'm watching them from afar, which you're kind of like a proud father going up there, seeing them go in and, do well. And because you kind of, you live the dream with them a little bit as their American League coach. They come in and they're bright-eyed and, they get off to a little bit of a rocky start and then they start to kind of build their game and you see the confidence in them. And you want these kids to do well, and they finally get their opportunity to come up the NHL and you're watching from afar. So this was a little bit different for me, having those players at the beginning of the year and then seeing, a Zach Bolduc or a Zach Dean come up and actually play in their first NHL game, and being a player myself and going through that process, and it's hard to explain it to the listeners sometimes, but like these, not just Canadian kids, but American Europeans, like growing up, and I can only speak for myself, but the years of dedication that goes into it, but also the like your parents and a lot that they give up and sacrifice, and the playing on outdoor rinks and the playing mini sticks on tournaments in the hallways, but it's always to play for the Stanley Cup, and have an opportunity to play in the NHL. And so I you get to see those young players now come up, that I coached in the American League, and now I'm here and I see them come up and they're able to play in their first game, and then how they both, and not only just the two Zachs, but Kessel and Tucker and Hofer and Jakey Neighbors and Torpo, how they've really grown as players and had a ton of success this year. Just as a coach, you really kind of relish those moments, I guess, and you feel somewhat, proud of these players because they're kind of like your kids when you kind of bring them up in the American Hockey League and then they get to where they want to be and you see them have all the success that they're having.
So, Drew, final one from me. You finish the season, the team finishes 11 games above 500. It's 11-point difference from last year to this year. From a head coach's perspective that was here for half of a season, do you feel like this team, this roster, this franchise is in a good position to see the other side of this retool?
Yeah, I think we built a good foundation, and I think there's a lot of lessons that we can take and reflect on this summer that is certainly going to make us a better hockey team. And I think, like I said, at this time next year with this team, we're going to be sitting here talking about playoffs and not going home in the summertime and being disappointed. I really believe in this group in here, and I believe that they're ready to take the next step.
He's Blues interim head coach Drew Bannister. We sincerely appreciate him taking a little bit of time with us today. Drew, all the best this summer. We look forward to talking with you again soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.
Drew.
Thanks for having me on.
Drew Bannister, Blues interim head coach. Appreciate his time. We'll be right back here at BK and Ferrario.
Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my friends at Rhino Shield. If you're a business owner right now listening and you've got a business that the exterior looks worn down, looks old, well, it's time to call Rhino Shield because Darren and his team are updating and giving a facelift to the exterior of people's homes, of people's businesses. And if you don't believe me, you could check out tons of different businesses that have used Rhino Shield. Chesterfield Amphitheater, Kempen Automotive in House Springs, Cottleville Smiles. They even worked on one in High Ridge in my neck of the woods, updating a complex, a little mall area. And look, it looked worn down. Water damage, brick was nasty, roof was old. Changed the entire outlook of it, and that's why I love Rhino Shield, because you could think you could do it yourself, but anything you're going to use, it's not going to stick like Rhino Shield sticks. It's a 2 to 3 coating process, 100% waterproof, deflects 90% of the UV rays. You have no worries with Rhino Shield, and they back it with a 25-year transferable warranty. So give the exterior of your business a new look. Give it the Rhino Shield look. Give them a call and tell them Alex Ferrario sent you. 877-25-RHINO. That's 877-25rhino.com.
.101 ESPN Sports Center.
I'm Jordan Deacon. The SportsCenter update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. We talked a lot about St. Louis Blues today. BK and Ferrario spoke with players Nathan Walker and Zach Bolduc, General Manager Doug Armstrong, and the Blues head coach Drew Bannister. If you missed any of those interviews, make sure you head to the 101 website or anywhere that you get your podcasts later today. Also, the Cardinals lost their final game of the series against the Athletics by a score of 6-3 yesterday. They're off today and begin a 6-game homestand tomorrow. That first pitch against the Brewers tomorrow is at 7:15. I'm Jordan Deacon. The SportsCenter update was driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
We're back to more exclusive Blues talk. 101 ESPN is live from the Centene Community Ice Center. Brought to you by Bud Light and E&B Granite. Bernie Federko's only choice for granite countertops, cabinets, and flooring.
Whirlwind of a day here out at the Centene Community Ice Center with Alex Ferrario. I'm Brandon Kiley. Grant Francis did a great job as well. He was in the interviews with Doug Armstrong and Drew Bannister. He also worked the room for some of the players. You'll hear some of that audio on the shows today. I'm sure the Fast Lane will have some of that they play, and then certainly tomorrow as well. If you've missed any of our conversations, there's been a bunch of them. We had Drew Bannister one-on-one. We had Doug Armstrong, which I thought was one of the best conversations we've ever had with Army. Yeah. Doing it in person is always better, and I thought he was spectacular. You can check that out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app. It's all presented by
Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
We also were joined earlier today by Zach Bolduc. He talked about the adjustment going from the AHL to the NHL. He also told us he's going to be going back down to the AHL, playing a couple of games for Springfield over the next few days. And then finally, we were joined as well by one of my favorite players to watch, one of my favorite interviews as well, in Nathan Walker. So all of that will be available after the show today, 101ESPN.com and the free 101 ESPN app. Alex, we've had a lot of information flying our way.
Yeah.
We've got like 6 minutes now to recap what we've learned today.
Yikes.
The biggest things that you've taken away from your conversations today with everybody involved is what?
That the Blues seemingly deemed this season a success without acknowledging that they missed the playoffs. That's the unsuccessful side, but there was a lot of success in this one. I think I've learned that Doug Armstrong has no pulse for a rebuild. And for people that say this is a rebuild, it is not a rebuild. And we learned that from Doug. A rebuild, and I loved Doug's answer because he could do it. If you guys want to rebuild, people listening, he can trade all these pieces away, and you could be a 50-point team for 5 straight years. But then you become the San Jose Sharks. It sounds like, at least in the press conference that he had with us, that he might have been too aggressive when he laid that 3-year plan out. But there's a plan that they have. He's not afraid to spend to the cap. He's not afraid to trade pieces away. He's not afraid to hand out no movement clauses. At least that's what Doug is telling us. But it does seem like the plan that is in place is going to come down to internal development, which we already knew. Bolduc, Dean, Kessel are all going to be a part of this roster. I did find it interesting that he said Dvorsky's going to have a shot at this NHL team next year. But I also view it, and I don't know if you caught this, BK, but when he was talking about the defense, he mentioned everybody but Krug and Falk. He mentioned everybody but Krug and Falk and then said, I expect us to push and prod to try and see what we can do on this defense.
I'm glad we had the same takeaway on that. On the defense, my note was push and prod to improve this offseason. Biggest improvement, or this season rather, biggest improvement was from Parayko. Mentioned Colton Parayko, Leddy, Tucker, Kessel, said they got, quote, answers on Scott Perunovich.
Yeah, that one was very alarming.
Then later mentioned we got some answers, whether it was good or bad. When talking about the good, did mention Bolduc and Kessel and Tucker and who else did he mention? Dean. So he mentioned all of them.
Toropchenko.
Did not necessarily mention Perunovich when discussing the positive returns on players that are young that they learned about. So I thought that's noteworthy. Think about that anytime you're listening to people in power within organizations. It's as much about the omissions as it is about the players that they mentioned. When he was talking about the players that they are planning around, Parayko, Leddy, Tucker, Kessel. Did not mention Krug or Falk.
Yep.
When asked about buyouts, said he's not necessarily philosophically opposed, but then explained why he would be philosophically opposed to doing so.
Tiptoed around it. It's fine.
So, yeah, I think this offseason he made a number of mentions to how their improvement will come from internal growth. And that's why I asked the question, Alex, that I did when we were talking with him about the balance of adding veterans but also having those opportunities for the young players.
I'm curious your take on that, because I'll give you mine when he said that.
I think they would really like to see the young players taking those opportunities. And I think what that means is signing stopgaps. I think you're probably going to see a couple of signings or trades this offseason that bring in players that are not necessarily super exciting. I don't think you're going to see a number 2 center by a
you're not getting Sam Reinhart free agency.
Reinhart. I don't think that's happening. I think like that list, that depth chart that they've got for 2027 that shows who they're winning with as their second line center, that name that is put in pin right now, in my opinion, is Dalibor Dvorsky.
Yep.
And I don't think they're trying to block him from that. So that might mean you come into opening night next year with Buchnevich as your second line center. It might mean Braden Shin is your second line center. It might mean somebody like Kevin Hayes is still here on opening night, or if Dvorsky's on the roster, he's traded. Like, I could see those being the types of decisions that they're making where it is, hey, if this, then blank. If this, then blank. And Dvorsky really is the root of all of those answers.
Yeah, that was my same thought. When he said those stopgaps, I'm thinking, okay, so Shen and Hayes are on this roster next season. Because if Dvorsky is here, the way he said it was a second-line center. That's a top 10 pick. But we're not going to force him into that role. And I thought it was interesting that he talked about how Dvorsky has not had stability in his time. It's been from one team in Sweden to another team in Sweden to the OHL, and he said the kid needs stability.
Yep.
They're not going to force this. If he doesn't look like he can handle the NHL roster, he'll start in the AHL. But if he comes in and impresses in training camp, he'll be in an NHL roster. And that's why Shen and Hayes are there, because both, by the way, have played wing this season. And if Dvorsky's there, well, now you got veterans that can back him up. And if Dvorsky struggles, well, now you've got those stopgaps. I think they're going to do everything, and I think the Snuggerud really changed what the Blues' plans were. I mean, Doug even said that Snuggerud was going to be in the same conversation as Bolduc and Dean for next season, but went back to college, which was fine, and now you have to wait for that piece, and so you're looking for those stopgaps. So yeah, my thought was there, and then I know we'll get more into this tomorrow. We talked with Drew Bannister, but I do think that Drew Bannister's got a real shot at this head coaching job. I didn't believe that coming into today, but hearing Doug say that was a wide list when they hired Bannister, and that list is now a very short list. And to Jeremy Rutherford's reporting on The Athletic of David Quinn and Joel Quenneville, I think you're talking about 3 to 5 guys that Doug is going to wait and see what happens in the playoffs, wait and see what happens with the individuals that are available, and then Drew Bannister is going to be on that list. So you might see Drew Bannister back as the head coach next year.
I think right now, if I had to write what, roughly speaking, the lineup will look like 2 years from now, because I think that's really what they're planning on, is they're looking 2 years from now what their lineup's going to be. I think Neighbors, Booch, Bolduc would be 3 of your 6 wingers in the top 9. Snuggerud and Kyrou I would add to that list. And I think you're looking for the last player. That might be this year's first-round pick. Might be a player that you add via free agency, via a trade. I think something in that range. Those 5 plus another winger will be your wingers. And then I think down the middle, you're looking at Thomas, Dvorsky, Shin, Dean.
Yep, that's what I have written down. The one that I don't have on there, because I think Saad's going to be at least a part of it for another year or two, and then depending on what happens with that, I think Torpo's probably going to get a really good shot at being a top 9 forward. I don't have Booch in there, so it'll be interesting because Army made it very clear he loves Booch, and he thinks Booch is the type of player that this team needs, but that comes down to contract situation, and does Booch not mesh with the timeline of what they're looking for?
And I think that it was really interesting. It sounded similar to what the Cardinals said about Paul Goldschmidt in the offseason when asked about if the Blues are going to approach Booch about an extension. He said, yes, the Blues would like to keep Pavel Buchnevich, and he made it very clear. He's a big Pavel Buchnevich fan, and he would like to keep him long-term. He said, if I'm Pavel Buchnevich, I would have some serious questions about what the immediate future looks like in terms of winning. Because Booch probably wants to win sooner rather than later.
31 years old.
And if you're in his scenario, am I going to do that here? And I think it's a fair question if you're Pavel Buchnevich of, hey, are you guys planning to win now, or is it going to be 3 more years of what we just went through? Because I don't want to be a part of that. I want to win now. And he's earned the right of getting to free agency next offseason if he so chooses. And that's where Doug Armstrong's going to have to sell Pavel Buchnevich on their plan. And if they agree on it, then you get to the money side of things. And I think that's going to be, honestly, easier than getting through the early conversations of what the immediate plan is. So that's where they're at on the discussions with Pavel Buchnevich. We're going to have so much more for you guys tomorrow. The Fast Lane has you guys taken care of from 2 to 6 o'clock for Alex Ferrario, who's done a fantastic job today, and Grant Francis, who's been out with us. Jordan Deacon back in the studio. I'm Brandon Kiley. We'll talk to you tomorrow at 11 a.m. Fast Lane coming up next.